Welcome to the Living Wholehearted podcast, where we're helping leaders live with integrity.
Whether you're a mom or a CEO, you're a leader, and how you lead matters.
Well, I am Tara Matson, and I am here with Connie Armerding. I'm so excited to be able to talk about women and leadership. You know, so much of what we talk about in Living Wholehearted and being able to help leaders live with integrity, whether you're a mom in the home or you're a CEO of an organization, it doesn't really matter because who you are is really what is the most impactful of your leadership and how you influence the people around you. And so someone that I am so grateful to call a friend, this Connie Armerding, she's an amazing woman of influence. Everybody who meets her, you just want to be around her. And so I'm excited that I get to introduce her to you today. Connie, tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, Tara. Thanks so much for having me. And I feel the same way about you.
Oh, thank you.
So I am a lot of things, right? As a woman, there's just lots of things that we hold in tension, and it's a beautiful adventure. So I am a wife to my husband, Taylor. We've been married for 16 years. I have 4 children. I have twin girls who are 11, and they just started junior high. They're in 6th grade.
That's amazing.
And then my son is almost 10, and he's in 4th grade. And then our youngest daughter is 6, and she's in 1st grade. So that's a big chunk of my time and number one passion. But in addition to that, I'm a writer, I'm a speaker, and I am a grad student. So in a lot of spaces and doing a lot of different things, but loving the different components that each bring a fullness of life that I'm loving.
Absolutely. It's a lot. Many, many hats you're wearing.
Yes.
How do you juggle it all, Connie?
I'm a mess a lot of the time is the truth. My house is not nearly as clean as it was years ago when I wasn't doing as many things. I think I just have to take it day by day. Mm-hmm. I think I can tend to get overwhelmed and thinking about all the things that are coming down the pike, even things that are really good and exciting. But I'm learning to just do the next thing. To do the next thing and to do that next thing well, whether it's homework with one of my kids or whether it's writing a sermon or whether it's finishing a writing deadline for work for curriculum that's about to be published, whatever, or making dinner, just to do it wholeheartedly. And I have a lot of growing to do in those departments, but I think just learning to take each day as a gift is a place that feels manageable and a great place to start.
That's so good. Just the next. And
yep.
Honestly, so many women will look at a woman like you and all the hats that you're wearing and go, man, she's got it together. And so I just love how real you are, Connie. And just, yeah, it's messy and it's learning to trust God with all those consequences. So one of the nexts, well, it's a little ways out, but the Encourage Gathering,
yes.
It's coming on March 13th and 14th next year, and registration is open. And you are one of our amazing breakout speakers. So tell us more about what you're going to be sharing.
Awesome. I'm so excited to be joining you. So thanks again for the invitation. I'm going to be talking about women in leadership, specifically the question that many of us ask is, do I belong here? And I think part of my journey in leadership and stepping into the spaces that God has called me to has been not without some turmoil. And I would say most of it has existed between my 2 ears, a space in my head, the internal conversations, wondering if I'm qualified, wondering if I'm called, wondering if I'm good enough. And these voices, internal voices, there's some external voices too, but the editing process of of listening to those voices and sifting through them one after the next. By the end of doing that, what I found was I was just paralyzed and I wasn't doing anything. Mm-hmm. And so it's been a journey to be obedient to what God is saying, to fear God and not to fear man, and not to get stuck in the analysis paralysis. Because there are some external challenges as a woman, absolutely, but there's a lot of internal challenges as well, and just some belief systems that I was functioning in that maybe I wasn't aware of that needed to be confronted. And then specifically as a child of God, made in the image of God as a woman, what does that look like? And regardless of where we are as women, we're all different, right? Mm-hmm. We don't have the same gifts. We're not called to the same spaces, but we are made in God's image, and He has placed us strategically wherever it is He has us in our life, our sphere of influence. We all have one. So in my breakout, I'm going to be talking about how we can, with confidence, step into the space God has ordained for us, just for us. It's ours. No one else can take it from us. No one else can fill it for us. And it's set before us. But how do we stand in the confidence of who God says that we are as his daughters, as his image bearers, to step into the fullness of what it means to lead? So we're going to look at women in the scripture who are all very different, who are all very courageous, who are all in places that typically women wouldn't necessarily be asked to step into. We'll look at Deborah, we'll look at Abigail, Mary, the mother of Jesus, Phoebe, Lydia, these women in,
exciting.
That are young and old and in different facets. And even though they're very different, they have one common theme, and they believed God and they said yes to what he asked them to do, and he equipped them for the job that was ahead. So it's something I'm really passionate about as a woman. Just to see the kingdom advance, to see everybody activated and actualized, and that we can be champions for each other, that women would really champion other women. So, that's what we'll be talking about. I'm excited about it.
Oh, I am so excited, Connie. I am so excited. So if you want to register for Connie's breakout, you got to do it because there's limited space in each breakout. So do it today. You can go to encouragegathering.com. That's encourage with an I-N, courage. Okay, Connie, you mentioned at the end there that you're really passionate about helping women really step into the spaces that they have been given, purposed by God, and to not compare, to be able to own their own. Talk a little bit more about your passion and your own story and how that's influencing the call in your life today.
Yeah, I think I've always been an extroverted person. I've always been a big personality ever since I was young. And for the most part, that's gone okay in my life, but there's been lots of times and spaces where I felt too much. I felt like it was too much. So I've spent a lot of energy in my life trying to be smaller than I am or different than I am, or as I mentioned before, those internal conversations were so loud and really debilitating. And as I've learned to accept the way that God has made me, because it's on purpose for his purpose, there's a freedom that I found that is, it's liberating. It's amazing, right? To not try to be something that you're not, to not try to fit into a bigger space or a smaller space, but just to be fully who you are, knowing that we're all in process. There's always work to do, but not try to, just to diminish yourself, yes. I guess. So I've been a woman for almost 40 years and been in spaces with lots of women. And I've been so thankful for deep, rich friendship in my life. I have wonderful, wonderful friends, and through all different seasons. But I have seen and experienced just in growing up and seeing the competition that happens with women and the cattiness and the backbiting and and just the limiting one another. And I think it happens in the church. And I think part of the reason it's happened in the church is because there haven't been a lot of spaces. There's been limited spots. And so there can be a lack mentality. There's wow. And I think when we believe the lie of lack, we start to put our elbows up and get really defensive. And even if it's people that we love and we don't mean to do it, I've been on both sides of this conversation. I mean, I'm not pointing a finger at someone else. I mean, I've done it myself because of a belief system that I have.
Right.
And what I see happening, which is beautiful, what I see happening, what God's doing in the world and in the church, is that there is this conversation is shifting.
Yeah.
We're believing the truth about the character of who God is, and that he's abundant, and his table is really big, and everyone has a place, and their places has their name on it, and someone else can't steal it from you, can't take it from you. So I think with women in competition that we see starting in young girls, there's such a necessary conversation that needs to happen early on about making room and respecting each other and being better together. And part of my job, what I do is I write friendship curriculum, and we get to teach elementary age boys and girls about the benefit of friendship and what that looks like.
I love that.
And how we can partner and how we can do it different, because our tagline is, when kids learn friendship, they learn it for life. And we believe that's true, is knowing how to be generous and how to understand that there's more than enough. We have a God that is abundant, and that everyone gets to fill their own space. And the world is actually better when that happens.
I love this, Connie, and I'm going to even drop it into you and I. I mean, you're talking about writing curriculum for friendship, and I've written curriculum for friendship as well.
Yes.
But the space that God has had me writing for is really in the home between the moms and daughters, and really practicing this in those relationships. And the space that God has been asking you to write has been to bring it into the schools and into the systems that where they're at a lot of the time during the days. And it's so exciting because the table is huge and there's a space for everyone. And honestly, we can't get this message out enough.
Right.
So God's using all different kinds of voices, all different types of wirings, all types of influence and giftings. And so even that, you and I having to practice, hey, look at what God's doing. And we could have that competitive piece that comes up, and the enemy tries, but to be able, and the fact that we're even both from the Northwest, it's not like you're on the East Coast.
Yeah.
We're in the same little hood here. So I love that. And I've always loved that about you, that there isn't that sense of like, let's do this together and cheer each other on. You live that out, Connie.
Oh, thank you.
You really do. And you can tell because it comes a bit from your story. So often it's our shame, it's our trauma, it's our context, it's the belief systems. And I love how you talked about what's going on between your head, and between your ears is what I meant. So tell us more. Tell us a little bit more about the things that you are longing to teach your own daughters and your sons when it comes to maybe something different that you're hoping for, that they'll learn in your home and the way that you are loving on them and discipling them, different from maybe what you got in your own culture growing up.
Yeah, that's a great question. I love how God has made men and women different. We're very different, and we have different parts of his image that we reflect to the world and that is needed. And I think sometimes we can take that and just make categories and say, like, this is just, this is a male attribute or this is a female attribute. And I think that can be really dangerous. And I think I grew up in a home that there was very specific gender roles. Wonderful parents. I mean, I had a great upbringing. But now, being a woman that is working and doing lots of things, I like to cook and I like to keep my house clean, right? But when necessity of time and deadlines and all these things are in front of me, I mean, it takes teamwork. So one thing that my husband and I mean, we're a team, and he's my best friend. I mean, I feel like we just tag team everything together. And I think it's just sort of, I don't know, we really talked about it. It was just sort of the way that we have always functioned. And I remember my son, who I think it was a few years ago, and it was in a busy season. And I think I was finishing like a grad school paper, and the house was probably not in tip-top shape. And my husband was coming home from work, and he had stopped at the grocery store and brought all these bags in, and Hudson made this comment. He's like, I didn't know men grocery shopped. And I said, oh, buddy, yeah, they do. Isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing that we get to all pull our weight and do what needs to get done? So I think I would categorize that into just do the next thing. So in our family, and we have 3 girls and a boy, but just what needs to get done. We're a team, and we're not just going to silo these different aspects of chores and jobs and responsibilities. And people have certain things that they take ownership of, but we just all chip in to get it done. And I think modeling that in daily life, day in, day out, is helpful. For my kids. And I think in the context of the church, I'm thankful that my kids can be in a church in a space where it's not uncommon, where they see a woman preaching, they see their mom preaching, or they see, men and women, different people serving in different capacities. So that modeling is important. I think that's true. Because we can say something, we can say we have a value, but then if it isn't represented, I think what probably gets communicated more clearly is what we see, how we see life actually playing out. So having these two things in alignment as much as they can be, working to minimize that space of just what we say we value in partnership and teamwork. And mom and dad are a team with discipline, with everything. It's like, okay, we're not going to just go to one because they have more power. This is a team dynamic, and how mom and dad are going to talk about it before a decision is made. And so, I'm thankful to have kind of real time conversations with the kids, and seeing how that plays out, and just seeing different ways that they respond, that I realize this is getting deposited in them, and how they see the world, how they see family function, how they see the church function. So
that's so cool. It really has been fun for me to be able to dialogue with you kind of offline, and for us to talk about how that's playing out in your home. I think one of the things that the church maybe gets confused, and it's mostly in my offices that I'm processing this, depending on which part of the church you're coming out of, and your family of origin, and their stories and culture. I mean, even across this country alone, there are a vast variety of cultures, from the South up here to the Northwest.
Right.
And that plays a huge role as well. So I'm curious, Connie, when you think about how do we tease out the confusing message between how we're a team, and we play out what's needed, what's next, versus the clarifying between God's design of a man and a woman? It's a big question, and I didn't have you prepare for it, so I get it. But I'm curious how you're helping your son and your daughters understand that God purposed them to be a boy and a girl. And yet there is so much overlap in terms of our wirings and our shape and our design, and it doesn't mean we can't do something.
Right.
But I think there's just confusion. All that gets muddled into one big bucket. Right. And so trying to tease that out a little bit. I know it's a passion in your teaching.
Yeah. It's a great question. I think just encouraging them to be who God created them to be, right? The things that my son is a sports guy through and through. I mean, it's like he eats, drinks, sleeps it. It's like he's rambunctious, he's active, and he needs to work that out,
Yeah.
And he has an unction to lead, right? And I see my daughters have that same unction to lead, but it looks different, right? And so I think communicating that there's strength in the ways that God has made men and boys, and there's strength in the ways God has made women and girls, and that I think celebrating the uniqueness of each gender is a great place to start, because I think what we see happening in the world is we take in the messages of feminine qualities are weak, therefore. And as a woman, I don't think I'm weak. Therefore, I'm going to try to be like a man. But I think when we go back and say, no, neither of these are weak. They're a gift. There's a gift in each and every one in the way that we're made. And we're all, women are all different. But even within that, what is uniquely feminine? And that's made in the image of God. And what is uniquely masculine? And how does that represent God's image to the world? And so I think instead of negatively defining something, we positively define it, right? We just we celebrate
exactly
what is really good, and what we love about that, and what we love about what I love about my son and the way that he shows up in all his testosterone, right?
Hormones play a big role.
Right. And so I think it's just keeping the conversation going. And I mean, we're in Oregon, and my kids are in public school, so there's some honest conversations that are happening with health education, and it's interesting just as the kids come home and they talk through those things. And my son actually, after his class last year, he just said, I just feel like it's information and we're not ready to talk about. It just feels not.
Wow.
He just said, I just felt uncomfortable and I just wasn't ready. Yeah. And I said, Betty, that's a really wise response.
It is a wise response.
Yeah. And so even in that, I think just understanding, sometimes we push things on kids way too soon that they're not ready for. And maybe it's not a relevant conversation yet. I don't know. and maybe I'm getting into muddy waters here, but
not at all.
Okay.
This is my turf.
Yes.
It's just in terms of our topic and women in leadership. I think it's a part of the conversation of gender. And when you start talking about gender, then we start talking about the cultural dialogue that we're having right now, and we've been having for a while. It's just at the forefront of our children currently.
So I think instead of an overcorrection, I see that's what's happening in the world. Is there's this overcorrection because we want to prove there's something to prove, and it's like I think when we just accept the way it's understanding first and foremost, like we're not weaker, it's not less than.
Yes.
Like it's different, it's unique, and it's beautiful on both facets, and we need both of them, and they need to be celebrated.
I love that. And I almost want to summarize, and I'm totally going to dismiss so much of what you're saying because there's a ton of profound. So rewind, listen to that again. But I just wanted to kind of mirror back that it's less about the what you can do and more about the how we do it.
Yes.
And how God designed that. And and then the reframing of not making a femininity or masculinity a negative thing, but really understanding the heart, the love design behind it, and the strengths. So the reframing and how the tone of how we talk about it, or even modeling it in our homes.
Yeah.
And then that last piece, which I might be adding, but is I think I heard it in there, was there's this level of having to really trust God's design, like that He purposed that. And sometimes we, in our human nature, in our what the church would call sin nature, we want to do it our own way.
Right.
And so that we just kind of, the continuum can get further and further out. And so especially for us women, it's not the what we can do, it's the how.
Yes.
So how do we discern our gifts as women? Tell us a little bit about your discernment. How did you know that you were to be doing these things like preaching in the church, Connie?
Gosh.
I want to hear more about that.
Well, when I was younger, I mean, I think we can look back on our lives and we can see indicators on like what God has put in us. You know, it's kind of a fun journey to look back. So when I was younger, I wanted to be a news anchor. I was like,
you did?
Yes. I mean, I have all these home videos with my cousin, H&H News. My maiden name is Hammond. So it was H&H News. And it was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I was talking about, but I had something to say. Right. So I mean, I went all the way through. I started in college. I graduated communications, but midway through, I shifted from doing, news and radio because I just wasn't that good at it. I need to find this tape somewhere and rewatch it. But there was a moment, and this was the moment. I was doing a project, and I was in front of the green screen, where you had the weather and all the stuff that's up there. And you were videoed, and I was sick, so I was losing my voice. And we had the teleprompter in front of us. We were supposed to read what it says. And so I'm trying to be all theatrical. I'm going to really get into it. So first off, I step off the screen, so I have the floating hand. Like that's the first mess up. And then I'm reading the teleprompter, and it's all about the weather. So it would make sense when I see the word climate that I would say that. I didn't say that. I said climax. And then I stopped myself, and I did this really weird, awkward thing with my hands, and I went, and then I just stopped and went, huh, and that was how it ended. Did not get a good grade on that. So that was the end of my pursuit of being a news anchor. What I can see now is I know that God had made me to be someone who proclaims good news, right? So at first I thought it was, let's just the news, but it's the good news, the good news of Jesus Christ. And so it was a long journey. I didn't come out of the gate thinking like, I want to be a speaker, I want to be a preacher. I think it's always been easy for me to communicate in front of people. I feel that's easy for me. I know that must be a gift because I know that's probably not a lot of people's stories. But as I wrestled as a woman in that space, I mean, there was a lot of years that I asked God to take it away. I begged to be different. I mean, like I talked about before, of like feeling like I was too much and trying to diminish myself. So I went through a really dark season because I was working through my own theology. I was wrestling with God's word, wanting to be faithful to that, and it was really challenging. And I would say I even had like a crisis of faith in that. It's like, God, why did you make me this way if this isn't an open door? And And God has been really faithful to walk me through that journey. And again, I would say listening first to what he has asked me to do, to walk in obedience, to step into the spaces that he is opening, and trusting that he didn't mess up when he made me the way that he did.
Yes.
So it's taken me a long time. I would say probably, I don't think I fully stepped into this maybe till about 2 years ago. It's been in the works, and I've always been a communicator. I've always been leading different facets, but stepping into with confidence that if God has called me to it, he'll equip me for it. And I don't need to open doors for myself. I don't need to make something happen. I just need to be faithful to what he's asked me to do. So yeah, I am. I'm a proclaimer. I'm a communicator. And primarily I know that it's communicate the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Amen, sister. And I know that to be true as I have been able to not only be on stage with you, but also be on the other end of your audience. And I think, I want to end with this. Our core values, we can see those in us from day one. And I hear you talking about being a communicator and using your words to proclaim. And that is something that comes from your wiring and God purposed in you. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your wiring?
Yeah. Well, it makes me think about one of the first times we connected when we started talking about the CVI, because I'm a merchant innovator. So are you. And I don't think I've ever seen someone with as similar numbers.
We couldn't stop talking.
We couldn't stop talking. So with merchant innovator, the combination, the values of those is truth and love. And so what I love about that too, specifically, is part of God's journey in asking me to communicate, to proclaim, has been to write. And so I just did it in, real small spaces where he asked me to. So I started writing. I started a blog about, 5 years ago. And the name of my blog is Truth and Love. So after I took the CVI,
amazing.
I know it was this moment where I was like, okay, God, all right. I get this. I hear you. I think I'm on the right track. So thankful for his little nudges along the way as we step out in risk and faith, because I think when you're communicating or putting something out there, it's vulnerable, and we're human. We're going to get stuff wrong, right? We're going to make mistakes. And so, we need to learn from those, but it's just a little bit uncomfortable, but
a little bit.
Yeah. But so I'm a merchant innovator, and relationship is of deepest and highest value to me. So, yeah.
And I know your numbers, you're profound in your merchant. You really do. You bring an abundance of love and truth to wherever you're at. And one of the things that God has just been showing me over the years, and a huge message of both encourage as well as our Courageous Girls curriculum in the groups, it's just really helping us to understand God's purpose. And all that you're sharing, Connie, I'm like, oh, this is courageous. This is courageous when we're literally obeying. And that word has such a bad connotation to it.
Right.
But obeying is a love word. And it's this word that's in response to saying, I trust you, God, that you have designed me. And so much we think obeying is doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Well, in this case, it's living out of your design. And it's scary. It's vulnerable. And so there is a risk to obeying and having to trust God with these consequences. And he's going, watch and see what I'm going to do when you put a blog out, or when you stand up and you share, and even here and now, trusting that he's going to use this the way he wants to use it, and letting go of our own agenda and trying to dictate that. And I think that's where we get lost a lot of times, was trying to say, you messed up when you made me this way, God, or when I put it out there, trying to control the way it gets used and how and what he does with it. You want to say anything to that before we wrap up this first episode? We're going to continue in a second episode.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm excited to be on this journey, and I think to be in spaces where we can communicate about it with each other. And that's accessible for other people, because I think these are necessary conversations.
Absolutely.
Really necessary conversations. And just that we wouldn't be scared of them, right? That we wouldn't, that we'd bring all of ourselves. And as we're learning and we're growing as leaders, I think one last thing I want to say, just as a leader and as a woman who's a leader, I think integrity is so important. And I know this is a huge passion for you and Jeff and for Living Wholehearted and this next book you guys have coming out. But just that when we make mistakes, that we own those, that we own our mistakes and or own our inconsistencies, and that we understand, we get connected to what is our true belief about something? And if our behavior is not connected, is not mirroring what we say our belief is, that we work to minimize that space, shrink that gap, right?
Yes.
And that we have trusted people around us to offer feedback, constructive communication. I think about the story of Samuel at the end of his life in 1 Samuel 12, where he says, to all the people, all the Israelites, like, testify against me, like asking, like, tell me, what have I done? And they didn't have anything to say to him. That would not be my scenario, right? I don't wouldn't be, right? There's lots of room for growth, but I love that story because I think it's an example for us to look to how, as leaders, how we continue to grow, that we posture ourselves in a place of humility. And I think as women, as women leaders, I'm so excited for what I see happening in the church right now. Like, I think about who I was as a young girl in church, I don't know, in junior high, and not really seeing a lot of women leading on any front, really. And now I think I just see them, like, bursting at the seams. Like, I just believe God is doing something in this day, in this age. And it is a beautiful representation of his image of men and women partnering together. It's not feminism. It's not women, like, leading the charge. No, I think it's this idea of people taking their space. So I think there's a lot of time in the church where women didn't take their space. And so I think I see that happening, and it's beautiful. And I think it's an advancement of the kingdom. So as we lead alongside other women and champion them, and then also lead alongside men, and how we do that beautifully to reflect God's image and God's love and God's mission to the world, right? That they would see something that's compelling, see something that's full of love, and see something that they need.
Amen. Well, let's continue this dialogue in our next episode. But if you want to check out more of what Connie is writing and where she's speaking, how can they connect with you?
Yeah. Well, I do have a blog at conniearmerding.com. You can follow me on Instagram or social media, just my name, Connie Armerding. And then I'm the content developer and curriculum writer at Joy of It. So we have some platforms there as well. We work to connect women all over the Portland area, the Portland region. And we do partnerships with Living Wholehearted and Courageous Girls, which is awesome. So the Joy of It Frenzy curriculum, check that out. And then our joyofit.org, our webpage is another place you can find out more about what we're doing.
I love it. And you need to come listen to Connie at the Encourage Gathering. So sign up today. And if you are really excited about what we're talking about, or you want to hear more, you want to contribute, please let us know. I want to hear from you. You can contact us. You can follow me at Tara Matson on Instagram, or Living Wholehearted, or My Courageous Girls on Facebook and Instagram. And definitely leave us a review. We want to hear from you, and let people, the more that you put reviews up or you subscribe and you send this out to others, the more that this message, this good news spreads, and people come to understand more of who God is and who they are. So thank you for joining us, and check out the next podcast coming up. Thank you for joining us in being a leader committed to shrinking the integrity gap between the values we espouse and the values we actually live out in practice.